friends, we have Germaine Pereira with us. She is a lawyer with extensive experience of 11 years in the field. She works with one of the leading and one of the oldest law firms called Solomon and Company. She is an expert in the field of law and she's passionate about working and helping kids. So let's talk to her. Welcome, Germaine.
Hi Reena, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to represent the legal fraternity and most importantly Solomon and Company on this forum. And I do hope this will help a lot of people who have the need to know where exactly they need to take care of legal needs and how the law will help them and their children to live normal lives.
Germaine, what is this Right to Education Act?
So, Reena, basically the right of children to free and compulsory education is also known as the Right to Education Act. Now, what this act typically does is it is an act which empowers the state government and the local bodies to provide free and compulsory education to children between the age of 6 to 14. Okay. Now, when we say free, that means that no child should be deprived for to education for want of payment of huge fees, and it should be made compulsory because everyone has the right to learn. Now, special needs, special kids have special provisions under the Act. For example, schools have to have 25% reservation of seats to enable.
I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I've heard of schools where they have an admission form where it says special needs, and if you put a tick there, you're not allowed admission.
Then if that is the case, then you can actually approach the relevant authorities and for example the state board and actually complain against the school because there is a need for a special reservation for these kids.
And what if the school says that we are not equipped to handle special kids?
Every school has to make it mandatory to have a special teacher to address these special needs.
By law?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is why you can have these kids in schools because the Act also provides for basically home learning, but that restricts the ability of the child to grow in a normal environment.
Yes.
And that is the reason why these schools are now encouraging children to join and live like normal kids and be amongst kids of their same age so that they can grow.
Okay. So Right to Education Act is for people who are from a lower socioeconomic state also and for kids who have special needs also.
Yes.
So
basically it gives a provision because you have people from the lower strata of the economy who also cannot afford it. So this is an act basically enacted for all children between the age of 6 to 14.
So this 25% covers both of them, as in
25% of the reservation is basically for disadvantaged groups, and this would also include people who have special needs.
So is there a proportion, which means, what I'm trying to ask you is
so there is no distinct proportion, but there is a mandate by the government wherein they need to give this special category of kids admission and they cannot deny them those rights.
Okay. And even if the person cannot pay, then what do they do in such a case?
If they cannot pay, then it says free and compulsory education. So when it says free, that means they have a right to learn, and then if there is any issue with fees, then of course the school will have to take care of those. They cannot be deprived of education just because they can't afford it, and that's exactly why the Act has been enacted.
Okay.
Because then the state government looks after such needs. Right to education is nothing but an act which provides for free and compulsory elementary education to children. Now, this was brought about by the 86th Constitutional Amendment.
What does it mean exactly?
So, basically, we have the Constitution of India and there are several amendments that take place. Okay, for example, if they want to insert a section. So, there was the section 21.
Amendment is a change?
Yes.
Okay.
It is an amendment. So, it's a constitutional amendment. So there is a section 21, which is 21A to be very precise, of the Constitution Act that has been now included into the Constitution. Earlier there was just there was Article 21. So this Act provides for the state to provide free and compulsory education. Now,
so it's similar to Right to Education Act?
Under this provision is when we have the Right to Education Act.
Oh.
So basically it is an act. The amendment has now empowered the act to give free and compulsory education to children.
So it's an amendment in the Constitution because of which the Right to Education Act happened.
Yes.
That's what it means.
Yes.
Germaine, what is Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan then?
Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is actually a movement that is started by the government, and it primarily aims at providing equal opportunity for children to develop knowledge through communication, through community based education systems. Now they specifically look after kids within the age limits of 6 to 14. Okay, so it basically is a community driven educational system.
How does that help a child who has special needs then?
So, children with special needs are special, and the Right to Education Act and the Free Compulsory Education provides for home-based education. So, rather than having children, learn at home and having special tutors going home and teaching them, subjects that are taught in school, this Abhiyan helps children to come actually into the foreground and actually learn with kids of other communities, people who have no disabilities basically.
So it's like inclusive, it's trying to promote inclusion.
Yes, because the homebound education system is nothing but a legal option that the government has provided to give these kids the right to education. But the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is an opened a forum wherein everybody should be allowed to learn and have equal treatment when it comes to education.
The Right to Education Act is effected through the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Is that how I can say it?
I would say yes, but this is not something that is a part of the act. These are various movements that have been that have been taken into place, and a lot of people have actually formulated these the Abhiyan, but it is not something which is mandatorily required under the act.
As in, how does one take the benefit of it? You know what I'm trying to ask you?
So this is nothing but the effort to universalize the elementary education.
So if I have a child who's not been taken in a regular school, who has special needs, he can write for RTE and he can approach the government under the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan thing that he's not been helped. Is that what I have understood properly?
No, what you have to do is, this is just a movement and this is just an effort. So ideally, if you want to have a redressal, then you need to actually go to the concerned authority or the the organization or the body that has been formed under the various acts we spoke about, like the National Trust Act.
Okay.
Is one of them.
Germaine, what is National Trust Act actually?
The National Trust Act, or the National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities, is an act which was enacted in the year 1999. The act was basically laid out to form a constitutional body at the national level to take care of persons with needs, with diagnosed with autism and cerebral palsy, mental retardation. The objectives of the National Trust Act was basically to empower persons with such disability to live independently and to live normal lives like people of like children all across. It strengthens, it provides facilities for strengthening them, to provide support to live within their own families, because that is one of the greatest concerns that people have. It helps them to deal with problems with disabilities and also promote measures of care and protection of persons with such disabilities basically. So the Trust Act provides for various facilities and safeguards against persons who are typically having these.
So it's like a body, it's like a group
It is a group, it is actually a body which provides for people with special needs.
Which comes under the Government of India.
Yes. So it is a national body. So this is the body which is controlled at the central level by the centre, and it basically regulates the various organizations that fall under this act.
Various organizations that fall under this act.
So for example, if you have people who are suffering from the various disabilities, then you can actually go to the centre, and of course the centre will empower the state to basically provide for certain facilities and to ensure that people with these special needs are being taken care of and given equal treatment in the society.
So for example, if suppose I am a parent of a child who has one of that condition, then what do I do if I want to get the National Trust Act whatever benefits?
So you'll have to approach the relevant obviously the centre will have the state board. You'll have to go to the board, and if there is, for example, certain aids that you need.
So it will be called as a National Trust Board. I'll have to find out in Mumbai.
Yes. So basically, obviously, every school is aware of such boards. Okay. But since your child is going to be enrolled in a school, you will need to go to the school, and then the school has got certain,
with the National Trust.
Yeah, because it's a regulated body. This
Okay.
body is actually regulating the welfare of people who are suffering from all these, disabilities.
Conditions,
Yeah,
huh.
or conditions as you call it.
So basically, a parent can go to that particular school. School is usually aware of these things, and they will guide the parent to go and avail the.
If need be. So for the parent, of course, the school is the one-stop shop. Okay, but for example, if there are certain issues wherein you feel that there are certain facilities which are not being extended to your child because the child has special needs, then you can definitely go to this welfare board and this organization, and you can redress your issue there.
Okay.
If the school does not have a whistleblower or a redressal mechanism in the school itself.
And it's easy to find a board in Mumbai or in any part of India.
It is centrally located, but yes, of course, they have boards in various states as well. So
Okay.
you can definitely approach them.
Germaine, you spoke about the National Trust Act. So what do these acts do actually? As in, what is supposed to be enacted?
So basically, the National Trust Act is actually the act has provided for a body called the National Trust. Okay,
Yeah.
like you have any other, like you have the Public Charitable Trust, and you have, for example, societies. So this is a governing body which actually looks after the welfare of such children. Now, for example, in society, if you have someone who is being troubled or someone who is not getting that kind of support that is required for the overall growth, and you feel that there is nobody to address your issue, then you could approach this body. Okay.
And you can write to them.
Yes, you can write to them, you can approach them, you can ask them for, because obviously they're here to redress any of your issues. So for example, if there is some kind of mental harassment or some kind of a punishment, or you're not being treated really well, so you can actually take this issue up before the body, that is the trust, and you can ask them to redress all your issues. So they form committees, and they will have a set of trustees, and the governing body will actually help you to address all your issues.
And whether it's happening in school, whether it's happening in the society, that doesn't matter.
No, because the trust the act is basically enacted to constitute this body to look after the welfare of people who are suffering from
Diagnosed with whatever.
who are diagnosed.
In any setup.
Yes, in any setup.
I have had some parents who came to me and they were asking me about this Mental Health Act. I think it's just recently formed. So what exactly is that?
Not so very recent actually, Reena, because we had the Mental Health Act of 1987.
Oh.
Yes, and the Act of 2017 actually supersedes that Act.
Supersedes as in it's just making
Yes,
updating things.
Yes, it is the newer Act, and it has just updated the provisions of the 1987 Act. The Act has basically been enacted to provide for mental health care and services to persons with mental illness. The prime objective is to basically protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of persons, because you should not actually have any discrimination, and there should be a right to equality and a right to life. So this act basically protects, enables a protection for people who are actually having a mental illness.
So mental illness would include what all?
So mental illness would be basically people having a substantial disorder of thinking or mood or perception or orientation or memory that is a little grossly impairs judgment. There is a very specific definition of the term mental illness in the Act, and if you fall within that definition, then you definitely can seek recourse under the Mental Healthcare Act.
So what do you get, as in if you fall under that bracket, what do you get?
So basically, if your right to life or your right to live or live with dignity is challenged, then you could basically approach the concerned authority, and you can file a case against somebody who's actually treating you badly, or harassing you or punishing you, and for example, just saying that you're suffering from a mental illness but you're not, and you can actually go and file a complaint against them
under the Mental Health Act. But when they
Yes.
complain, who do they go and complain to?
So you can go, basically the local authority is the police. Okay, so when you're filing a complaint against a person against mental harassment, then you need to take certain sections of this act, and you can actually get protection.
So the police is aware of this act.
Yes.
When they go, they can say that.
Yes.
As in, what I'm trying to ask you is, if I go and I say, cover me under Mental Health Act, is that what I would go and say?
So you need to basically prove that somebody has been harassing you, and somebody has been. First of all, do you have a mental illness? Is the question. Okay. Now, if you have a mental illness,
and I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. So mental illness would be for any age, right?
Yes.
This one, it's not
yes.
about a specific.
No, it's not
age
about
group.
any specific age group, or it's not for a specific person. It is an act which is enacted to recognize that everybody has a right to grow. There is, you need to have that freedom to live, and if at all there is something that is challenging you, and a medical practitioner has actually certified that you have a mental illness, then you can, with the help of that certificate, approach the authorities, or you have various organizations who actually stand up for such causes, and then you can ask them to help you and protect you against people who are actually taking advantage of you.
This act is something like, I'm sorry, but what I feel is like how we have 302 and we have like whatever IPC. Is that what this act is about? No.
So this is an act. Yes, of course it is. There are sections under the act, and if at all tomorrow somebody is really harassing you, and you really have to go to a police and you need to file a complaint, like an NC or an FIR, then there are certain sections that you can use, apart from the fact that you have the 302 and all that. There are various sections in the act itself which you could put forth, and you can say that there is
so you can go and you can say that this is the section that I feel that whatever.
Yes, because when you make a complaint, then you have to first of all be certified to have a mental illness.
Because people usually don't, I'm just generally talking, they would not even entertain you when you go usually. Yeah. So you go and you say that this is what I feel and this is what has been happening, and I need an NC or I need an FIR. That's what we want.
See, because it also depends upon, Reena, very honestly, the level of
the harassment,
the level of injustice, the level of discrimination. Based on that only would someone want to go and address an issue. Okay, because if you're just passing by and somebody says, listen, you're suffering from a mental illness, when you're not suffering from a mental illness, then there are various other recourses under law that you can actually, you can actually sue someone for defamation. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if at all you really are a case wherein you are suffering from some sort of illness, and you have a medical certificate, then of course you have that special privilege to go to the law-abiding authorities and say that, listen, I need to file a complaint, and these are the sections, because obviously he knows what sections he has to put because he's the law officer.
It means, so I'm asking this is, if the person has the mental illness, he will not be able to go and file a complaint in the first place, because he wouldn't be able to make that judgment. So a person can go on behalf of him and file a complaint too.
Yes.
Right? It can be done.
So what happens is, of course, if you have a mental illness, you don't have the capacity to, and again, mental illness could not be that you're suffering from some mental disability. It could be at a certain period of time you're actually a normal person, It's just that, you're under some kind of a drug, or, drug in a sense, like maybe you're on a certain kind of a medication.
What I'm assuming is, when you say that the person is not able to make a judgment or something like that, I'm talking about kids with special needs here, adults with special needs here. So would they come under this?
Yes, anybody would fall with, so whoever falls within the definition of having a disorder in thinking, or someone whose orientation is an issue. And again, I repeat myself by saying that you need to be certified by a
doctor,
the doctor
the
who
authority.
knows, the doctor who knows such cases,
Yes.
So once that has happened and you have the certificate with you, and it is certified that you have this mental illness, then obviously you will need to have some guardian or your parent who will have to take care of your rights and protect you. So then that person, together with the family members or friends, could really take up the cause before the police, or even local people. Or for example, you have ALMs.
What's ALM?
So you have these, basically you have societies, you have ALMs in a sense, like you have the the various small communities. So you could go to those communities and you can actually, like social workers. So the difference, Reena, between the Mental Health Act of 1987 and the Mental Health Care Act of 2017 is that the newer act basically superseding the old act in the sense wherein mental health care and services to persons with mental illness has been brought out in the new act. So that is basically the primary difference between the two acts. There are certain revisions that have been made. So there are certain additions, insertions, deletions. So these are the, so certain things have been amended.
Germaine, what is this Pwd Act? Persons with Disabilities Act?
Yes, it is the Persons with Disabilities Act, which has now been repealed by the new Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. So the Pwd Act was actually an act of 1995 and which has been repealed by the new act. This act typically gives effect to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
So it's an act in India, right?
Yes, it is an act in India and it is basically giving effect to the UN Convention.
Meaning, I didn't get it.
So you have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and of course India being one of the 135th countries that has actually implemented a lot from the UN Convention. They have now repealed the 1995 Act with this new Act of 2016, and here there are basically a lot of responsibilities that have been cast upon the state. In a sense, the state has to ensure that there is protection of rights, provisions for medical care, provisions for education, training, employment, for people with disabilities, and certain rehabilitation centers that need to be set up so that they could be taken care of. It also helps in creating a barrier-free environment for such persons by sharing development benefits vis-a-vis non-disabled persons. Now, if at all you are someone who feels that you are actually suffering from a disability, and again a medical practitioner has actually certified that, then you can actually go to the to the relevant body that has been cast out under this act and apply for a disabilities certificate.
So how is this different from the certificate that they get in a hospital?
Because that is a certificate that is going to be given to you under this body that is set up under the act.
So you would get a certificate which says PWD certificate?
Yes, it is a certificate that is issued to persons, and it is categorically under the Pwd Act of 1995. People with autism, learning disabilities are not covered under this act. So those are a special category of people.
They are not covered?
They are not covered under
Why?
this act. They haven't covered them under the act. Because then you have the National Trust Act that they can actually go to. So
it's a
that could be one of the reasons. Now, of course, this certificate also has a validity period, because if at all you have a certain disability, and if because today there is so much of rehabilitation and there are so many programs that you have. So if at all you do not fit into the definition, then you may not be required to be called a disabled. So that is why the validity of the certificate is probably just for 5 years.
So who's covered under this?
People who are actually suffering from physical disability. So there is a set of
Physical
people.
disability.
Yeah.
You spoke about the Persons with Disabilities Act. So what happens when they get a certificate, and which are the conditions that are listed under the Pwd Act?
So there are around 21 set of disabilities that have been now enrolled under this act. For example, the act includes dwarfism, acid attacks, blindness, Parkinson's.
Okay.
So this is in addition to what was there earlier. There were, I think, around 7 that the Act of 1995 had.
And now it has 20?
Now it has 21.
21, okay.
Yes. So these are all covered under the act, and if at all, depending upon the medical certification by a doctor, if you fall within these levels or the percentage that has been stated under the act, then you can apply for a certificate.
And what happens, meaning when you get a certificate? What do you get, as in what concessions?
So if you have a certificate, then of course you could go to probably to an employer who has a special requirement, and the organizations provide for people with such disabilities. So this certificate will actually help you probably get a particular job or a particular subsidy or certain bank loans.
Oh, even bank loans?
Yes. So there are various provisions and a lot of entitlements that you can avail of by enrolling and applying for the certificate.
What are the facilities and concessions that an adult or a person with disability certificate gets?
So there are several facilities that the government actually extends to people with disabilities. Like for example, there's an age relaxation of up to 10 years for as an upper limit for recruiting people into government jobs. Okay.
10 years?
So they're given a 10-year extension. So for example, if
okay.
yeah. So
okay, I misunderstood it.
Yeah. So basically there's a relaxation in the age once you're an adult, of course. Okay. Then persons with disability should not be denied any promotion in their employment. So there are special safeguards there wherein you have to be given equal right for a promotion. There should be no promotion denial. For example, like the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has actually had a 7.5% reservation for all types of dealership agencies of the public sector oil companies, wherein these people have to be given jobs, persons with disabilities. So this reservation is mandatory for these.
Wow, that's good.
That's very good on the part of the Natural Gas Ministry. Then the National Handicapped Finance and Development Corporation also provides loans of approximately 3 lakhs to around 25 lakhs to people who have disabilities. There are also several tax exemptions under the Income Tax Act if you are a person who's certified as having disabilities. Then legal guardians can be appointed for people with such disabilities. Then you are, for example, if you're working, then there are certain exemptions under the indirect tax. Of course, today we don't have the indirect tax laws, but you have professional tax which you're exempted from paying. Then there are various interest rates that would be probably much lower than what a normal person would be, person without a disability would be paying.
So interest rates on home loan and stuff like that.
Yeah, so basically social objectives, that would be something wherein a state bank or a public sector bank would give you interest at a lower rate than
a loan. You mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. So that again is that's again another facility that you get. In short, like these are the various benefits that you can avail of.
Okay.
So there are special benefits that are given to disabled people.
What is this Juvenile Justice Act, Germaine?
The Juvenile Justice Act is an act which was enacted in the year 2000, and the act basically provides for care and protection of children. Now this it basically helps because the act enables, they have certain enabling provisions when you cater to basic needs through proper care, protection, development centers, treatments, rehabilitations. It provides for adopting a child-friendly approach in disposal of matters. So for example, when you have certain offences that a child may commit, and he is a juvenile and not of the age of maturity, then there are certain safeguards that, for example, even an investigating officer needs to take care of while he is interrogating, or while even if there is, say for example, imprisonment, then again there are some special prisons that these juveniles will be sent to. So the act basically provides for their care and protection.
So what is this maturity age about?
So the age of majority is under the Minors and Guardianship Act is 18 years of age.
So anyone who's below 18 would fall under this act. Anybody.
Anybody, yeah. Male or female, any child.
Germaine, what about corporal punishment in schools? I mean, what does the law say about it?
No school is allowed to inflict corporal punishments on a child. Okay, the Right to Education Act specifically prohibits physical punishments or mental harassment to any child. If you remember, we spoke about the Juvenile Justice Act.
Yes.
There again, cruelty to children is definitely not allowed. And in case you have a school who's actually, encouraging such practice, then it is punishable under the law, and the punishment could include fine as well as imprisonment for a term of up to 6 months.
Oh.
Or fine in both.
Okay.
So it is a very serious offence.
Germaine, the educational provisions that a child gets, are they the same all over India, or it varies from state to state?
Ideally, there are various acts that the centre has enacted to ensure that the level of education is the same across states. Okay, so the centre and the state government make various provisions to protect child's rights and ensure that everybody is receiving equal level of education, and everybody has got the amenities and the facilities that are provided across the state, so that there is no differentiator or differentiation between the states. So therefore, if you, like we spoke about the National Trust Act and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, so these are all enactments which are made at the national level, so automatically they are made mandatorily. The state needs to follow them, and it's compulsory for everybody to have equal education. But yes, of course, there are certain states which have their own facilities or their own acts that they may have, which are state acts. Okay. But definitely the central acts are the ones that...
So there are state acts also and there are central acts
Yes.
also. We have this SSC board, ICSE, CBSE, and what I know, you can correct me, I feel that those boards can start, schools start using the syllabus from 8th, 9th and 10th. Before that, I think everyone can follow any syllabus. I don't know, how does it work?
No, Reena, I'd like to differ on that point a bit. So the SSC, like we very commonly call it, is actually the secondary school certificate, and that is a certificate that is issued by the state government. So that is a state board. Okay. Then you have the ICSC. Okay, that is the Indian Certificate of Secondary Education, which is an examination conducted by the Council for Indian School Certificate Examination. And this is a private board, unlike the SSC, which is actually a public board because it is a state board.
Oh, okay.
So that is the difference between the two boards. You asked me about the CBSE. So that again is the Central Board of Secondary Education. This is a board which is a national level board.
Oh.
So there are three different boards.
So one is a state level, ICSE is a private board, and this is a national board.
Yes.
Okay.
And this basically the CBSE has the public schools as well as the private schools. So you can actually both be governed by the CBSE.
So when we have these different boards, a child can shift from one board to another, and that's okay, right? From an SSC to ICSE or from an ICSE to SSC, that can be done?
Yes, of course you can do that.
It can be done.
Yeah.
And if a parent has a concern with regards to any of the boards, then what do they do?
So every board has a redressal mechanism. For example, the ICSE has a council. Okay, so if at all you're facing a certain issue, then you can actually first of all speak to the principal of the school and try to address it there. You have PTAs, like the Parent Teachers Associations. So various associations that the school actually has, where you could actually go there and say that you're having a problem or you want to redress a certain issue or raise a certain complaint. Now in the event that there is no redressal or there is absolute neglect, or your complaint or your query is actually ignored, then you could write to the council, and the council will then investigate as to what exactly is the issue. They could also call for an inspection and find out, basically send their inspectors to school and really to identify whether there is really a genuine issue or it's something which is.
So this is only for ICSE?
No. So again, you have the secondary board as well, like I said, the state board. You have inspectors out there also. Reena, I don't remember if any inspector visited your school, but I study in the state board, and I did have these surprise checks wherein one fine day, the teacher would say, okay, now so you need to all tidy up, and we've got this inspectress who's coming to school.
Yeah, so we used to have that.
Yes. So they also have some sort of this kind of an inspector, and who comes and does just checks as to everything is in order or not. And at times they do speak to children and just do a one-on-one with them to identify if there are any issues that these innocent kids are facing. Okay. So there's definitely
so there's SSC, ICSE, and even CBSE has it?
Yes. So the CBSE would come directly under the aegis of the Ministry of Human Resource, and that's the HRD ministry. There again you have a board, and you can take up your grievance with them.
Germaine, I had a parent who came to me whose son was just 2.5 years of age, very little, and then they put this small little girl in nursery instead of playgroup. So I was like shocked, and the parent came to me for occupational therapy because the child was not writing, and at 2.5 years of age, no child will write, So is there a law by which we can regulate that child, the entry to play school in the first place? Is there something of that sort?
So, Reena, that is really very shocking to hear, because the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights provides certain guidelines for play schools. Now, only a child who has completed the age of 3 years should actually be enrolled in such a school. So, if you're saying the child is 2.5 and is, told that you need, some special, therapy,
exactly,
it's a bit alarming, and I think you definitely could take it up with that concerned play school.
So what is it that I can do as a therapist?
Very honestly, as a therapist, you may not be able to do much. It is for the parent to really do something.
And what is it that the parent
First
can
of
do?
all, I don't see how a child of 2.5 will be able to, for example, write.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because at that time they're just learning the basics, So they need to basically
play.
They need to play, and they need to be, put at a later age, in fact. So there's not much a therapist could really do, because at that time the therapist may not even be required.
Exactly. That's exactly what my point was. I said I'm not even needed in your child's case, So is there something, there is, you said it is there.
So the government has basically said that no child below 3 years should be admitted to such schools. So if you come across such schools, then definitely, again, like I said, we could take it up with the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. There are several organizations that look after child protection and child care. So we could identify these and, you know, take it up as a cause.
Germaine, I had a child who took admission in a particular school, and you know, during interview it was all good, but now that he was not sitting, not talking, not doing what other kids of his age were doing, the principal called the parent and they said, you know what, you will have to take the transfer certificate and you'll have to leave, LC, leaving certificate, and then you'll have to leave our school. So is that something that can be done, and what does a parent do in such a case?
Honestly, the school can't do that because like we spoke about the Right to Education Act, it is an act which provides for education which is compulsorily supposed to be, you know, imparted to all children.
Yes.
And up to standard 8. So
Yes.
if the child was in standard, you know, 1 to 8, and if that has happened, then the parent should definitely take it up and, you know, take it up with the concerned board. So if it is an SSC board or a council that, you know, the ICSC, then you could actually write to them, because leaving certificate is not an option. There are special children with special needs, there will be special teachers, and what exactly is the problem needs to be defined by the school.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
leaving certificate is not the right option.
And if the school says, then the parent can stand up against it. What does a
Yes.
parent do then? They just write.
Ideally, Reena, see, very honestly, you'll have to understand whether the child is actually able to cope, or is it the child feeling very stressed about the whole thing. Okay. But if it is certified that it has certain needs, then the school has to also give them certain exemptions. Like, for example, if all children are, you know, doing 10 subjects, then probably there should be certain subjects, they are allowed to choose certain subjects, you know. There are provisions
Yes.
under the Act which enables them to do 3 subjects instead of, for example, you know, 3 subjects instead of the 5 that a normal child is doing. So you need to
There are
identify
provisions under the Right to Education Act.
Yes, so there are certain provisions which talk about, so various acts. That's not only
Okay.
only the one act that I'm talking about. There are various like the boards basically have their own rules and regulations. Okay, so the HRD ministry will also have certain set of exemptions that they will make for these kids, and up till standard 8 they should be allowed to study. So
I get it.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's not allowed, and the parent can usually meaning parent can ask and write to the council.
Yes, because until and unless there is a reason why you are asked to leave, leaving is not the only option.
What exactly is PTA and why is it formed? What is the purpose?
So PTA is what I understand is the Parent Teachers Association, and for example in Maharashtra we have the Maharashtra Educational Institution Regulation of Fees Act, which makes it compulsory for every school to have a PTA. Now the PTA is actually formed as a body to ensure that, you know, the parents and the school together is looking after the well-being of the child. So every parent should be a member of the PTA. You know, if there is anything to do with the syllabus or the planning and measures to be taken for weaker students, or any extracurricular activities, or even getting information about tuition fees or school buses, or, you know, any other concern or need that the school has or the child has, it could be taken up at the PTA level, and, you know, you could form probably rules and regulations in-house.
That was the reason why it was formed. So what are the rights of a PTA? PTA can ask for all of these things from the school?
Yes, because it's an organization that has been formed now by the educational institutions to ensure that parents are involved with the overall development of the child along with the school. So it's basically sharing the mantle with the parent and allowing them to, you know, enhance the the productivity and the overall growth of the child.
It means that the PTA, whosoever it is, has the right to ask the school for all of those things, and if the school doesn't cooperate, or if the school doesn't, you know, like give you what is asked, then what is to be done?
So Reena, the PTA is an organization that has been set up by the school. Okay, now a school is again an institution that is formed probably by trustees. Okay, so they have certain guidelines that they need to follow.
Yes.
So if a school is run by a trust, then the trust has trustees. The trustees are governed by the covenants of a trust deed. So what the school does, what are the limitations they have, what is the level of flexibility they have, everything would be governed by some, you know, deed or some institutional or constitutional document that the school is basically formed by. So as you say that the PTA should have a right to, probably do everything, but then the school has its own regulations as well, and it needs to maintain those.
So both of them have to work hand in hand and cooperate with each other. That's
Yes,
what it is all
yes.
about. Okay, and in case the school doesn't follow whatever the grievances are, then what does it do?
So then you go to the board, basically, because the
All
PTA
right.
is the body that is formed to ensure that there is, there's uniformity and everything is run well, and things like that. Of course, you have a board of trustees. Okay, so
Yes.
they will be taking care of various other needs of the school.
Yes.
Okay, like for example, financial expenditure, which probably the PTA will not be able to,
Yeah.
handle. But if there is a requirement for upgrading the syllabus or having some sort of a cultural activity, then that is when the PTA can, be involved and present it to the principal and to the board.
Germaine, are there any rules for school buses? Are there any regulations for school buses?
There are rules and regulations for school buses, like for example, like the Supreme Court of India in one of the cases, it's a writ petition actually filed by MC Mehta versus the Union of India, and there was this the whole case was about the safeguards for school buses, and then the Supreme Court has actually laid down several guidelines with regards to what exactly should the contractor of a school bus, what are the requirements that are that need to be mandatorily adhered to. For example, the doors should have proper locking systems, the windows should have proper grills, then there should be an attendant in the bus, both male as well as female. Then you should have a medical aid box in the bus.
And a school bus should be
Yes,
written
the school bus should be written on the back and the front, and if at all the bus is only for school duty and it's not for for any other purpose, then it has to say on school duty. That is mandatorily supposed to be mentioned on the bus. Also, the drivers have to have a minimum of 5 years driving experience.
Okay.
So these are just a few of the guidelines that I'm telling you about, but yes, it is supposed to be adhered to. Then we also in Maharashtra have the Maharashtra Motor Vehicles rules of 2011 that were laid out, which specifically says that you have to have a certain, the driver who's driving the bus should be medically fit to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things.
And what happens if these rules are not followed? What can a parent do?
If the rules are not followed, then the parents have the parent teachers organization. Okay, they need to take it up with the parent teachers organization, because every school bus that is operating would be through a contractor, of course, or it could be the school bus of the school directly. If the school
Yes.
owns the bus.
Yes.
Now, if the condition is that the school owns the bus, then you take it up directly with the school. Otherwise, the parent teachers association should actually go and find out as to whether there is a contract with the service provider, and it all amounts to deficiency of service, because if you're not able to, you're going to be paying school fees, and if you're the school bus fees,
yeah.
and if your child is not going to be safely traveling to school, then it is a matter of concern, and that must be
What
taken
if
up.
the school says that, we have hired and it's a, it's not our bus, we've hired and we play no role. Can the school say something of that sort?
No, but then the school has hired the school bus, right? It's not a private bus where a couple of children are going to go in that particular
Yes.
bus, and few parents have come together and
Yeah.
said, like, let's have a minivan, for example.
So if the school has hired, then the school will be...
The school is responsible,
Yeah.
but of course responsible because there would be a contract
Yes.
with the contractor, and in the contract there would be certain terms that they need to fulfill. Otherwise, there is a breach of the contract, and then the school needs to relook at hiring probably another contractor or addressing the issues under the contract.
What can parents do, with new thing, as in, there are so many new reports of sexual abuse happening in the school. So if something of that sort happens, what can parents do? What are their rights, So can you throw some light on that?
Ideally, the school should have these sessions, and in fact even parents should encourage talks with children from a very young age as to what is a good touch and what is a bad touch.
Yes.
Okay, and they should educate their children in terms of with who they should go, not dealing with strangers and things like that. But and most importantly, I feel it is in a home where parents and maybe extended family should educate the child to bring up issues if at all there are any, and if they come across any circumstances which are a little suspicious, and there should be that kind of open communication at home.
Yes.
Now, in case the parent finds that there is some abnormal behavior that the child is displaying after coming back from school, probably there could be some incident in the school bus, or there could be something in school itself, he has to have that ability to speak to the child.
Yeah.
If the child speaks or says that this is what has happened, then the parent should take it up with the concerned school first of all. If that doesn't happen, and if the school is not really paying any heed to it, then the parent has the ability to go to the for example, you have the Juvenile Justice Act. So you have a special juvenile police unit, or you have a local police station where you can actually go and make a complaint against offenders, which are it could be actual or it could be intended. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that the act has to be committed. Even if you feel that there is something wrong and someone's really troubling the child and trying to sexually abuse the child, you could actually file a complaint.
So this is a very valid point, whether it's intended or it's actual. So it's amazing. Great.
Yeah. So then you go to the relevant authority and you can actually complain against them. There is definitely imprisonment, which could be up to 3 years. There is fine, and depending upon the how grave the act is, you could have life imprisonment as well.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can definitely take this up.
What exactly is a legal guardian, and how does it apply for kids with special needs or for kids with autism?
A legal guardian is a guardian that is appointed by a court. So that's how you call it a legal guardian, because a natural guardian is actually your mother and your father. Now, if a child is has a special need, then you have to have somebody who is capable and mentally having the ability to look after that child.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go and make an application to various organizations, which will in turn help you to make that application to the court. So, for example, whatever is the district court, the Bombay High Court, for example, in Bombay, and make the petition saying that why you need to be the guardian.
So you need a lawyer to do that?
Yes, ideally you need a lawyer. You can actually, if you are able to prepare the petition yourself, then very good, because the law allows you to stand in person or appoint a counsel. But the only thing is, if you appoint a counsel, then you are able to understand the system, the procedure, the law, and things just get done in a very organized manner.
So you write to the court, that's it?
You have to basically file a petition to the court for appointment of a guardian. Okay.
And why is it needed to appoint
Because what happens is, ideally the need for appointing a legal guardian will arise only when the parents are not able to look after the child. So, for example, if at all you foresee that maybe you are suffering from some ill health, or for example you want to have a safeguard or a protection for your child in the event that you are not there. Okay, so you will have to have a provision for having a guardian to look after the child. So at that time you can basically decide who is going to be the guardian.
I was under the assumption that if a child with special needs becomes an adult, then at that time a parent also have to appoint himself as the legal guardian, because then the person becomes an adult.
Yes, because
so
even guardian, yes, because what happens is, you can have a guardian until and unless you're a minor. But once you cross a certain age, like for example the age of 18 years, then obviously you are capable enough you're an adult. So if you still have a special need, then you need to go and make an application to the court saying that you need to be a legal guardian for this particular person.
So it's needed, no?
Yes,
it's needed,
because the person is not able to do task like a normal person does.
Okay.
So there are certain mental challenges that
which
he
are
may
involved.
face. Yeah.
All right.
And then he would also be owner of certain properties, immovable, immovable, and that you need to take care of those properties. So how would he, having special needs, be able to take care of them himself? So you need to appoint a guardian for that.
How long does it take, as in to get?
See, that depends upon the complexity of the situation, because ideally once you make the petition, there is a certain procedure that you need to follow. Now the court will look at the overall scenario and also want to see whether you have any personal gain in the matter. Because obviously, if you're going to be the guardian of a child with special need or an adult with special need, there should be no motive behind that application.
But if the parent wants to become, then it is okay.
Yes, if the parent wants to become, then there is no harm, and that would be much quicker. So I think in a year's time you should be able to get that.
Acha, in a year's time?
Ideally, considering all because you'll have a hearing, you'll have a, there'll be very...
It takes time.
Yes, by the time you make the application, you file the application, it would take time.
Before making a will, what are the things to take care of if you have a child with special needs?
If you have a child with special needs, then you need to take care of, the maintenance of the child, the ensuring that the health facilities are extended to the child, and also if at all the child is able to study, then probably higher education for the child. So all these things could be taken care of by putting specific provisions in the will. Now, because the child has special needs, you will need to appoint a guardian. As long as you are there, well and good, but when you're not there, you need to have a guardian to look after the child.
But first you also become a guardian, no?
So when you are there, you're obviously looking after the child. But when we are talking about a will
Okay.
is, the will is a legal declaration, which is your actual last wish, and it is going to state how you want things to happen once you're not there.
Yes.
So what happens to the child when you're not there? So what we have seen a lot of people doing today is, for making a will, you need to have an executor. So the executor is someone you trust and someone who you think would probably look after the child, because the executor is going to be executing the whole process in terms of your properties and in terms of everything that you want to do with, your assets once you're no more, including looking after the benefit of the child. So one is you can have proper executors. Two is you could have certain provisions in the will itself. Like say for example, you have a lot of assets, like a lot of shares or a lot of income or finance or properties, and your child is a child of special need and is unable to think for himself. And sometimes if he's the only child, then that's a worry. If there are other siblings, then again the worry is, that he should not be cheated or, not be given equal right.
Yeah.
So what we have seen a lot of, parents probably doing is putting in a particular structure in a will. Now, when I say a structure, they say that, okay, we have we have these assets, so let's form a trust, and that trust will then, it's a private trust, so that is not governed by any statutory body. It's a private document that you prepare a deed, and then you set out rules and regulations under the deed. You have trustees. So over there you will say that all the monies that are there will go to the upkeep of my child, and probably if he gets married, then you can use it for his wedding expense, and if there is certain medical need, then you could use it for the medication. So these are the various things that you can actually spell out in your will. Otherwise, what you can do, if you don't want to really put a trust option, then you can actually say that who you want to have as a guardian and what is the role of the guardian and how they need to look after the child, and basically spell out everything in the will.
So what is this Niramaya scheme for persons with disabilities?
So like we have various insurance policies for covering various health issues. We have a special customized scheme called the Niramaya scheme, which looks after insurance policies for persons with autism, cerebral palsy, multiple disabilities and mental retardation. Now what happens over here is, it is a affordable insurance plan, and you get an insurance cover of up to 1 lakh, which is I think quite good. And there is the key to this whole insurance policy is, like unlike others, you don't have to give any medical test, or you don't have to go undergo a medical examination. So I think that is one easy sail through to get this policy. Basically providing this insurance policy to people across various financial groups, because even the amount is quite reasonable. 1 lakh is like a huge cover for them.
Germaine, what is this Rehabilitation Council of India Act?
The Rehabilitation Council of India Act is an act which was set up in the year 1992. The act basically enables or basically formulates, regulates and monitors the various programs that you have across various age groups of people and individuals who are suffering from certain disabilities. So it is basically to monitor those programs and to ensure that everything has been, it's basically as per the required norms and the various acts that we spoke about, and maintain central rehabilitation registers and ensure that it is centrally uniform.
It's just a regulatory kind of a thing.
It is an act, and that act provides for rules and regulations. So as you had asked me a question, whether everything is uniform across states, of course you spoke about education, but this is for rehabilitation, because people will have these disabilities across, and everybody should have equal treatment and equal opportunity for a rehab. So that's the reason why the centre has actually passed this act.
So thank you, Germaine, for coming and for speaking and for sharing your knowledge. It was really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Reena. It was indeed a pleasure to be a part of this show, and we are very happy to contribute to anything that you may need. So if you require any further clarification or any other information, please do not hesitate to contact us. Yeah, and thank you once again.
Sure. Thank you so much.
You.
was speaking to Germaine Pereira, who's a legal expert at Solomon and Company, which is one of the most leading and one of the oldest law firms. To learn more about law and the rights of kids and adults with disabilities, stay tuned on my channel and keep watching. Thank you.